Guantanamo Bay, waterboarding, Bagram, the legacy of Bush's so-called war on terror has dominated, above all others, the headlines during the first months of the Obama administration. But the debate on torture is done. The United States did torture. The debate on whether torture is effective is over. Too many professional interrogators from the FBI and the U.S. military have come out to say not only is torture ineffectual, it's actually counterproductive. So what we want to know is who's responsible for the torture that did happen, and how should they be held to account? I'm Josh Rushing, and welcome to a very special edition of Fault Lines.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
The whole accountability debate was born out of what appeared to be a positive action.
So help you God?
So help me God.
Just 2 days after taking office, President Obama signed a series of executive orders, closing Guantanamo Bay within a year, banning torture, and shutting down the CIA's network of secret prisons.
There we go.
However, the new president didn't completely turn his back on all Bush administration policies. The rendition program is still an open option, as is indefinite detention by executive order, and detainees at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan still cannot challenge their detention.
And that is why I can stand here tonight and say without exception or equivocation that the United States of America does not torture.
The problem is, according to international law, the United States did torture. So who was responsible, and should they be brought to justice? The question of accountability is all-consuming. After much internal debate, Obama delivered some transparency, releasing the torture memos. 4 previously classified Bush administration documents revealing the extent of the waterboarding of Abu Zubaydah and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, among many other details. The memos opened the floodgates.
Yeah, you like that?
In a speech at Langley, Obama told operatives they would be shielded from prosecution.
God bless the United States of America.
But a media storm followed, and within days, the president tacked back, saying the door was open to prosecution of higher-ranking officials.
With respect to those who formulated those legal decisions, I would say that that is going to be more of a decision for the Attorney General.
All eyes were on May 28th, the date the Pentagon was expected to be forced to release photographs of detainee abuses from Iraq, pictures similar to those taken at Abu Ghraib. A former U.S. general who says he has seen the photos confirmed that they depict the rape of Iraqi detainees by a U.S. soldier and a translator. But another backtrack from the Obama White House blocked the release of the photos.
In fact, the most direct consequence of releasing them, I believe, would be to further inflame anti-American opinion and to put our troops in greater danger.
But a ghost from the past continues to haunt the debate.
Ladies and gentlemen, former Vice President Dick Cheney.
He may have been almost invisible in the White House. Now, Dick Cheney seems to be everywhere, ostensibly defending the Bush administration's conduct.
As for those who asked them questions and got answers, they did the right thing. They made our country safer, and a lot of Americans are alive today because of them.
So should the U.S. ignore the dark secrets of America's recent past? Or is it now time to cast a light on exactly what happened and for justice to be served? To answer those questions, we've invited a studio audience to witness and participate in a debate with a panel of guests from all sides. Our guests today are Lawrence Wilkerson, a retired U.S. Army colonel and Colin Powell's former chief of staff. Michael Scheuer is a former CIA analyst who authored the rendition program under Bill Clinton. Jumana Musa is a human rights attorney and activist. She was one of the first lawyers allowed to travel to Guantanamo Bay. And Jim Moran, a Democratic congressman. He's currently serving his 10th term in office. Colonel Wilkerson, let's begin with you. Do you think that there needs to be accountability?
As a citizen, do I think there should be some accountability for what has occurred? Perhaps my answer would be yes. But as a student of government and as an academic who teaches government and as a person who's been in government for 40 years, I don't think there's the skill or the will.
Well, okay, but I'm asking you, one of the leading voices on this. You've been in the media a lot talking about these issues. You think there should be accountability. What form should that take?
If you're going to do it, and if you're going to test what I've just said, which is going to be a severe test.
Look, political will begins with voices like yours, Colonel.
You better do it like we did the 9/11 Commission. You better have a presidentially and a congressionally established group of people whose integrity and character is relatively out of the question, and who are going to sit down and deliberate over this for an extended period of time, and thus do two things. One, and most importantly, come to an answer finally and resolve this. And two, get it out of the news, get it out of the media, lower the tension and the discussion, if you will, and actually go after it for whatever it takes them, 6 months, a year, or whatever.
But Congressman Moran, you were in Congress during the Truth Commission for 9/11. Isn't it the fact that they have to give immunity to so many people who were involved that no one in the end is actually held accountable?
I'm not interested so much in holding these individuals accountable as holding the United States accountable and making it clear that these actions are not defining of who we are as a people. Whether they go to jail or not is really inconsequential.
Well,
What matters
isn't it
is
justice, though? Isn't part of the entire United States system set up on the rule of law and justice? And I don't know how you dismiss it so easily.
Well, the problem is too often we wind up punishing the people at the lowest level, the Lindy Englands of the world, the private who was involved in the abuse at Abu Ghraib. The people I want to hold accountable are not the ones who go to jail generally. They're the lawyers who deliberately redefined the existing law. They are the policymakers who sought out how to go about torturing people using the Chinese Communist Manual on how to extract false confessions. They are the people who made it standard operating procedure of the United States. When it becomes the standard operating procedure, when it gets blessed by at least the vice president, if not the president, then we are all accountable.
Name names. Who are you talking about when you say the people who made it standard operating procedure?
Dick Cheney. Bybee. Bybee is a federal court judge on the appeals court. He shouldn't be there.
Should charges be brought against Bybee or Dick Cheney?
Again, I want them to be exposed as people who were not carrying out American policy.
Michael Scheuer, is he talking about people like you? You were the head of the bin Laden unit.
He's talking about nonsense. The congressman knows that ultimately who's responsible for everything that goes on in the foreign policy realm is the Congress. They can cut off money tomorrow for whatever they want to. They were briefed on these programs from 1995 forward, and now they're looking for scapegoats for political purposes here. It's an insane kind of, we're focused on a little non-issue. The congressman argues, other people argue.
Wait a second. You're saying accountability for laws that were broken, non-issue.
There's no laws that have been broken. No one's proved that a law has been broken. Everything that was done with the approval of the Department of Defense, or with the approval of the Department of Justice, with the acquiescence of the Congress, and with funding from the Congress.
Let's bring a lawyer in. Jumana Musa?
Treaty's not law, right?
Is the Geneva Convention law?
The treaty actually says, in cold, hard language, a treaty to which we are signatory says national emergency, executive orders are nonsense. They do not apply. Nothing gives you an escape clause from this treaty. As far as I'm concerned, as a person who's raised his hand and sworn to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, treaty law is American law.
Well, if the Senate approved that treaty, the Senate is an ass.
Tough. They approved it.
But you want to put it on Congress, so let's talk about that for a second, because Congress also passed the anti-torture statute.
Why didn't they enforce it?
Which makes torture, because Congress doesn't enforce it, right? That's a criminal statute, which
Congress
means it has
enforces
to be
everything,
prosecuted.
ma'am. Nothing runs in this government without money.
You have the same kind of theory as Cheney does about the government, apparently, which is sort of this shifting idea of who's in charge of what.
I don't think so. I think Mr. Cheney is a despicable reptilian
person. Well, the simple fact is there's a criminal statute on the books. It's a great tagline, but let's talk about what you're talking about, because there is a criminal statute on the books that allows for the criminal prosecution of people for participating in torture overseas and for conspiracy to participate in torture overseas. And Congress did pass that law. So if you're saying it comes back to Congress, it now seems incumbent on the Justice Department to enforce that law.
Right. Let me say, I would welcome an investigation where I could testify under oath publicly on television before the Congress, so the American people know that the world's greatest superpower depends on its defense on rendition, interrogation, UAVs, special forces, and our enemies run over us roughshod. None of these things should be major defense things, and they are because our presidents are mostly moral cowards.
Mike, I like your bluntness because it captures people's attention. I don't necessarily agree with the content of what you're saying, though. For 6 years, the Congress was a rubber stamp of the executive branch. And some members did know what was going on, and I think should have spoken out. The problem is that it's classified information, so it's illegal for them to say anything. The Congress does make laws, but it's up to the executive branch to implement those laws. And in this case, it was the executive branch that deliberately sought out torture tactics. It was the president who chose to go to war. The Congress obviously ratified it, but it was not the decision of the Congress. And it was the executive branch who chose to use what they called enhanced interrogation techniques, and then to use a legal legerdemain trying to redefine what they knew to be the existing law to excuse it. Now, I grant you the Congress stood on the sidelines, didn't stop it.
Well, how about for you, Colonel? Knowing what you know now, should you have quit?
I've said this a number of times. When Secretary Powell gave his presentation at the United Nations in February 2003, that was the lowest point in my professional and my personal life. And I wrote out my resignation and put it in the middle drawer of my desk and looked at it probably every week thereafter. And if I have a regret when I go to my grave, it is that I did not resign.
And you have been one of the most vocal voices attacking Dick Cheney in the press recently. Should charges be brought against Dick Cheney?
How do you do that? Tell me how you do that in our federal democratic republic as it exists today. Tell me how you do that.
Is there anyone that can answer that question on the panel?
Well, you can hold him, you can subpoena him. There's plenty of ground to subpoena him by the Congress. He is a private citizen. He's required by law to appear. And if we don't get intimidated, I think that he would appear. And
great qualifier, though, there. If we don't get intimidated.
Well, I agree.
I'm with you, but
yeah.
I didn't quite get an answer out of you, Colonel. Should Dick Cheney be brought up on charges?
I think our Constitution provides a real cure to bad executives. It's called impeachment. We missed our chance.
So the answer is no, he should not be brought up on charges.
I don't know how you do it, and I'm a practical person. I hesitate to recommend things or even to passionately defend things that I know are impossible in the real world.
Okay, let's say it was practically possible. Maybe it is practically possible, and we just don't know the system well enough. Let's say it is practically possible. Should Dick Cheney be brought up on charges?
I would rather see, this is me, Larry Wilkerson, I would rather see 6 or 7 lawyers, starting with David Addington, the brainchild of all of this in the Vice President's office, including you, Bybee, Haynes at OSD, Gonzalez, and several others whom I could name, disbarred before I'd rather see Dick Cheney held accountable in a way that sends him to jail or whatever. Because these people, in my mind, are ethically marred. They fail their profession. They fail the rule of law. They essentially acted as lawyers, in my experience in the military, whom we despised acted. They didn't say to their boss, tell me what you want to do and I'll tell you if it's legal. They said, tell me what you want to do and I'll make it legal. That is unprofessional, unethical. They should all be disbarred. I'd much prefer to see that happen than I would see lonely, paranoid, frightened Dick Cheney sent to jail.
We're going to break, and also in the second half, we're going to be taking questions from the audience as well. Stay with us. Welcome back to a special edition of Fault Lines. We're discussing whether those serving in the Bush administration should be held accountable for the torture and abuse of detainees that happened during their time in office. Thank you for coming back. Right before the break, I think the congressman was responding to Michael Scheuer, and your point here seems to be that, look, you can point fingers at the CIA, but it's Congress that authorizes and pays the bill.
You can point fingers at the executive, you can point fingers at the CIA, but ultimately, what's reprehensible to me is the Congress, after knowing about it, after funding these programs, comes back and suddenly it's Claude Rains in Casablanca, and they're shocked, like Mrs. Pelosi, who seems to be one of the greatest liars in America. Second thing the Congress said about war, I think he's exactly right. The great tragedy of post-war American history is the Congress's supine reaction to the executive and letting one man, Democrat or Republican, guide 300 million people into war. The third point I would make is this business of rendition and interrogation is important to get sorted out. But when the congressman and other people say this is a great recruiter for al-Qaeda, let me tell you what's the great recruiter for al-Qaeda. When Mr. Obama goes to Cairo and raises his arms with Hosni Mubarak and cheers for freedom, and then goes and kisses the royal buttocks of Prince King Abdullah in Saudi Arabia because we're dependent on their oil, that's much more recruitment tool for al-Qaeda than anything that happened at Abu Ghraib or Guantanamo Bay. This is small potatoes.
It's funny to watch this lobby. It's executive, it's Congress, it's Congress, it's the executive. I don't work for either branch. I'm not a Democrat or Republican, very happy independent. And what I'll say is it's both of them, but that doesn't mean because you could say, well, the Congress did this and then the executive did that therefore you shouldn't really pursue it or get into accountability because everybody's kind of afraid of what's going to happen when their secrets get spilled out on the table. I mean, that's part of the fundamental problem, right, is everybody is in CYA mode trying to cover their own ass, sort of in what part they may have played in this. But it's not true that Congress knows where every dime is going. I think the congressman was about to say that, in fact, they weren't aware they were funding secret prisons where people were being disappeared and tortured. And, you know, as you said, there's no debate, and it's been out on the record they were being tortured, and exactly how many times in some incidents. In some instances, we know what tactics were used.
Bring us to now, though. Bring us to the Obama administration.
I absolutely will. So we started that volley already, and I think it's continuing. So is Obama better? Sure. But that's not very difficult. McCain would have been better. I mean, I think there's no question about it, right? I mean, I think the particular cabal that you had in the last administration, when you're talking about these attorneys and Dick Cheney and all these folks who were very much involved in this, it would have been difficult to get worse from that point, but getting better doesn't mean right or good or done, right? And I think that's where we are at this point. And I think it's almost more dangerous when you're going to change some, codify others, but do it with a sort of kinder, gentler, Democratic administration, great moment for America president. Is a great moment for America, but that doesn't solve the problem.
Scheuer.
In this particular, this is really an insane kind of situation here in the sense that our treatment of prisoners under President Bush was infinitely better than under President Clinton. Clinton sent the people that were rendered to every Arab prison that he could find because he wasn't man enough to handle them himself. Clinton didn't care.
No love here for Bill Clinton, but Bill Clinton didn't put 741 people, of whom about 700 were innocent, in Guantanamo.
Well, and I think the other piece is, and this is completely the distraction that happens, right, which is, well, Clinton did something worse, and then, you know, bin Laden does something worse. The point is not that at all. The point is there's a law, and there's a standard, and there's people who breached it.
The point
and that's
is that
the fundamental
America has been
baseline.
ill-defended under the first Bush, under Clinton, under the second Bush, and Mr. Obama doesn't know the first thing about how this world works. If he's going to go to Cairo and cheer freedom with Hosni Mubarak.
I'm not saying that's not a problem.
All right, let's hear what the audience has to say. Full disclosure, I know the person I'm going to give the first question to. His name is Nathaniel Raymond. He's with the Physician for Human Rights.
Thank you. The question I have for all of you is, putting aside the issue of accountability and the Commission of Inquiry for a moment, we have clear physical and forensic evidence that people who were never charged with a crime at Abu Ghraib, Bagram, and Guantanamo were tortured, with the effect being long-lasting physical and psychological harm. What does the United States government owe those men who were released without being charged with a crime and are now suffering from the effects of torture for the rest of their life?
Congressman, you're the only one who can actually do something about this. You're in the government.
Well, the process that we have is one that we use within the domestic United States for people who have been abused by their own government, illegally, inappropriately, whatever. But you have to prove that in civil court, and then you sue for damages from the government. Those are the kinds of things I think should take place.
Congressman, that sounds great, but in fact, that's not what's happening. When they go, their cases are thrown out for a myriad of reasons. I interviewed Mehar Arar, who was extraordinarily indicted, if that's what you may say, to Syria. Turns out all the intelligence came from the Canadian intelligence agency that has now completely cleared him. He's brought the case in Canada. There's an apology. There are reparations. He's brought the case to the U.S., and he can't get it through the court system.
Well, and I think that's something that the executive can also do unilaterally in terms of trying to address some of these issues. But instead, the executive is going to court in these cases and saying these cases can't even proceed to pleadings because everything is a state secret, even information that's been out in the press. And that was fascinating about the Arar case, in that there was a full commission of inquiry in Canada. It was public. There was information on the record. In the United States, they said we can't even acknowledge any of this happened. And when the Congress tried, and Congress did try to bring him here to testify, the U.S. government said, well, we still know he's dangerous, and we can't tell you why, but we're not going to let him in the country. And so I think that's the unfortunate position where the Obama administration so far has taken on the Bush mantle of saying everything's a state secret, this cannot be examined, and we're not going to talk about it.
All right, we have a question from the crowd. Sir?
I would like to know, we've all pretty much acknowledged that the reality of the situation is that not a whole lot is going to get done, that there probably won't be a full and complete accountability of everybody who made these decisions, that there's not going to be any kind of prosecutions. We probably won't see Dick Cheney in the docks anytime soon. What are the consequences if nothing is done here? What are the consequences if nothing happens?
They're serious in terms of diminishment of our real power in the world, because our real power is as much wrapped around an idea as it is around the military, nuclear weapons, or whatever. We're unique in that respect in the world. And so many Americans seem not to realize that because they don't know our history. As Gore Vidal said, we're the United States of amnesia. We are. We don't read. We don't know other languages. We don't study our own history. Our history is the history of an idea, an imperfect idea. Our Constitution made people like you slaves, made them 3/5 of a person. Our Constitution has changed. We've grown. We've moved towards that more perfect union. We ain't there yet. We never will get there. But that idea is our most powerful weapon in the world, and we have done consequential damage to that idea in the world. Our power has been diminished by doing that.
Boy, that's good.
Michael Scheuer, I want to get one more question in before we're out of time, but do you have a quick comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think our reputation in the world probably has been harmed more by supporting the Islamo-fascists that rule the Islamic world than anything we've done. And this is an extraordinary situation in the sense that what we're talking about here is not a criminal problem to begin with. These people we have in camps are not criminals. They're fighters in a war without uniforms. And the way to handle this is the way we handled the Germans and the Japanese. Put them in stockades, let the Red Cross bring them cookies, let them right to their mamas, and keep them there until we say the war is over. The war was declared on us. And if the Europeans say there's no Geneva Protocol that covers that, then tell the Europeans, let's write one.
There is a Geneva Protocol that covers that.
Exactly. And as long as we keep them in those prisons, the war will never be over.
But
that's
unfortunately,
the issue. No, sir.
The other issue is
unfortunately, this show is going to have to be over.
1,000 people,
Colonel,
interrogators, soldiers, others. We have a lot of people in jail who haven't done anything but get caught. They're not guilty of anything.
Hey, I'd like to thank my panelists. This show is unfortunately going to have to be over now. Thank you so much, panelists. Audience, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for watching Fault Lines on Al Jazeera. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jumana. Thank you.